My mother gave my brother a $150,000 Tesla and handed me a $10 mug from a discount store. She forgot one thing. I own the house they live in. Let me tell you how 5 years of ramen noodles, double shifts, and a 400-square-foot apartment ended with me on a phone call with my lawyer at midnight, and my family waking up the next morning to change locks and a repossession truck in the driveway. This is not a story about anger. This is a story about the moment a man finally sees clearly, and what happens when the person everyone treated like an ATM decides to close the account. I want you to picture something. A room, maybe 12 feet wide, 14 feet long. A twin mattress on a metal frame pushed against the wall. A single window that faces a brick wall. A bathroom so small you have to step sideways to get to the sink. A kitchen that is really just a counter with a hot plate and a mini fridge humming so loud it keeps you up at night. That was my home for 5 years. My name is Daniel. I was 26 years old when I moved into that apartment. I had just landed what felt like the best job of my life, a project coordinator position at a mid-sized logistics company. Solid salary, benefits, stability. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like things were finally clicking into place. I remember calling my mom to tell her about it. Her name is Patricia, but everyone calls her Pat. She has this warm, round laugh that fills a room, the kind of laugh that made you feel, as a kid, that everything was going to be okay. She cried a little when I told her about the job, said she was so proud of me, said she always knew I was going to make something of myself. I was on top of the world that night. I made myself a cup of instant coffee and sat on the floor of my new apartment. I didn't even have furniture yet. And I thought about the future. I thought about saving money, building something, maybe buying a car, maybe visiting more, maybe, eventually, a real place to live. I was 26 and hopeful, and I had absolutely no idea what was coming. The call came 3 weeks later. Mom's voice was different, quieter. That laugh was completely gone. She told me that she would be behind on the mortgage, 4 months behind. She said she hadn't wanted to tell me. She said she'd been trying to handle it herself, but the bank had sent a letter, and the letter used words like foreclosure proceedings and final notice, and she didn't know what to do. I remember my chest tightening. The house she was talking about was not just any house. It was the house I grew up in. The house where my grandmother used to sit on the porch and shell peas. The house where I learned to ride a bike in the driveway. The house that smelled like my mother's cooking every Sunday morning without fail. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a big oak tree in the backyard that my brother and I used to climb. It was home. The real one. The permanent one. I asked her how much she needed. She told me. I did the math in my head. It was going to be tight. Very tight. But it was doable if I was careful. If I cut everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. If I lived small. I told her I would handle it. She cried again. This time it wasn't pride. It was relief. And something about that sound, the sound of my mother exhaling 5 months of terror, made every sacrifice feel completely worth it. I told her not to worry. I meant it. What I didn't know, what I would not find out for 5 years, was that the mortgage had not been the only problem. That the mortgage, in fact, was only the beginning. The first thing I did was make a budget. I am not exaggerating when I tell you how brutal it was. Rent. I found the cheapest apartment in a safe area, and I took it immediately. No negotiation. No waiting for something better. That 400 square foot room with the humming fridge and the brick wall view. It cost me $650 a month, which in my city was practically a miracle. Food, ramen noodles, rice and beans, eggs, frozen vegetables, bread, peanut butter. I learned to cook in bulk and eat the same thing for 4 days straight without complaining. I became genuinely skilled at turning almost nothing into a meal. I bought a second-hand slow cooker at a thrift store for $4, and that thing saved my life. Transportation. I sold my car. I bought a used bicycle and a bus pass. Rain, cold, heat, didn't matter. I pedaled or I rode. Entertainment. I canceled everything. Every subscription. Every streaming service. I borrowed books from the library. I watched free content on my laptop until the screen started flickering. I did not replace the laptop for 2 years. Clothing. I wore what I had. When something wore out, I replaced it at the thrift store. I had 3 pairs of work pants, and I rotated them carefully. My coworkers probably thought I owned exactly 1 wardrobe. And every month, without exception, I transferred 70% of my paycheck to my mother. 70%. I want to let that number sit for a moment. After taxes, my take-home was around $3,200 a month. I was sending $2,240 to my mother every single month and living on $960. In one of the most expensive cities in the country, in a room the size of a large closet. At first, it was supposed to be temporary. Get her caught up, stabilize things, and then slowly pull back as her situation improved. But every time I tried to pull back, there was a new problem. Month 3, the water heater broke. Month 7, a medical bill she hadn't mentioned. Month 11, property taxes came due. Month 14, the roof needed patching. Month 19, her car needed a new transmission. Every single time she would call with that quiet voice. And every single time I would look at my budget, find something else to cut, and send more money. I picked up a second job in year 2. Weekend shifts at a warehouse. Friday nights, Saturday mornings, sometimes both. I would finish my office job on Friday afternoon, go home, eat something fast, sleep for 4 hours, and then drive a borrowed car to the warehouse and lift boxes until my back ached. I did that for 18 months. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was worth it. I told myself that one day I would look back on this period and feel proud of what I had done for my family. I was not wrong about that last part. I just didn't know yet what looking back was going to feel like. Let me tell you about my brother. His name is Marcus. Marcus is 3 years younger than me, which made him 23 when all of this started. He is, by all accounts, a good-looking guy. Charming. The kind of person who walks into a room and immediately knows how to work it. He has my mother's laugh, that big, warm laugh, and he uses it like a tool. My mother has always called Marcus her golden boy, not as a joke, sincerely, to his face, in front of other people, in front of me. When we were kids, I told myself it didn't bother me. Marcus was younger. Marcus was the baby. That's just how it was. My mom would ruffle my hair and tell me I was her responsible one, her rock. And I decided to interpret that as a compliment and move on. But here is the thing about being called the responsible one your whole life. It is not actually a compliment. It is a job description. It is a role you are being assigned. It means we know you'll handle it. It means we don't have to worry about you. It means your needs are secondary because your capability is assumed. Marcus, meanwhile, was the one everyone worried about. And worrying about someone in a certain kind of family looks a lot like adoring them. Marcus never held a job for more than 8 months. He would get hired somewhere, do well for a while, get bored or restless or have some kind of conflict, and then quit or get let go. And every time that happened, he would come home, come back to that house, back to his old bedroom, back to my mother's cooking and my mother's patience, and I would later discover, back to my mother's bank account. When I was sending money home, I thought it was going to the mortgage, to the house, to the foundation of our family's security. I did not know that a significant portion of it was also going to Marcus. I did not know that when my mother said medical emergency, she sometimes meant Marcus needs money. I did not know that the unexpected repairs occasionally included things that Marcus had broken. I found out all of this later. Much later. And I am getting ahead of myself. What you need to understand right now is who Marcus was during those 5 years while I was eating ramen and riding my bike to work. He was living at home. He was not paying rent. He was not contributing to the bills. He was taking road trips with his friends. He was going to concerts. He was buying clothes. He was dating. He was living the life of a man with no financial obligations, and apparently no awareness that those obligations were being carried, invisibly, by someone else. By me. Every time I called home, my mother would tell me what Marcus was up to. The tone was always the same: fond, proud, slightly worried, but mostly entertained. Marcus is thinking about going back to school. Marcus went to that music festival in Austin. Marcus is trying this new thing with cryptocurrency. Oh, Marcus is just figuring himself out. You know how he is. And I would say, "That's great, Mom." And tell him I said, "Hey." And then get back to my rice and beans and my Friday night warehouse shift. I genuinely did not feel bitter about it at the time. I want to be honest about that. I had a purpose. I was the one holding things together. There is a certain quiet dignity in that, a certain identity that I had built my whole sense of self around. I was the dependable one, the one who showed up, the one who didn't need anything. The danger in that identity is that eventually people start to believe it. They start to believe you actually don't need anything. They start to believe your sacrifice is just your nature, not a choice. They stop seeing the cost. And when they stop seeing the cost, they stop being grateful. And when they stop being grateful, well, that's when you end up at a birthday party holding a $10 mug. In year 3, something shifted. I had been sending money home consistently. The mortgage was current. My mother had stopped mentioning foreclosure. But every time I suggested we sit down and talk about a long-term plan, every time I said, "Mom, we should think about how to get you stable enough that you don't need me to send this much every month," she would deflect. "Oh, I'm managing, honey. Things are just a little tight right now. Let's talk about it soon." Soon never came. So I did something that I told myself was practical. I told myself I was just being smart. I told myself it was the responsible thing to do. And there I was again, playing that role without even realizing it. I contacted the mortgage company directly. I explained that I was Patricia's son, that I had been helping with payments, and that I wanted to understand the full picture of what was owed. It took some back and forth, some documentation, some phone calls, but eventually I got the number. The remaining balance on the mortgage. It was significant. But after 3 years of extreme frugality, of the warehouse job, of cutting everything possible, I had savings. Real savings. More than I had even realized, because when you live on almost nothing, money accumulates. And I made a decision. I paid off the mortgage, the entire remaining balance. I arranged it as a direct payment, structured it legally, had an attorney involved to make sure everything was clean. The house was transferred into a trust that I controlled. That was the attorney's advice, to protect the asset and make sure the transaction was handled properly. What this meant, legally and practically, was simple. I owned the house. My mother lived in it. She had always lived in it. That didn't change. I didn't tell her any of that part. I didn't tell her about the trust. Didn't tell her I was technically the owner. I just told her the mortgage was paid off, that she didn't have to worry about it anymore, that the house was safe. She cried harder than she had ever cried before. She said I was her angel. She said she didn't know what she would do without me. She said she thanked God for me every single day. I said, "I love you, Mom. That's what family does." I hung up the phone, sat down on my twin mattress, and felt, for the first time in 3 years, like I could breathe. The house was safe. I went to sleep that night feeling like the best son in the world. After the mortgage was paid off, I expected things to change. I expected the monthly transfers to decrease. I expected my mother to start standing on her own financial feet a little more. I expected some version of the conversation we'd never quite managed to have. The one about sustainability, about me being able to start building my own life. Instead, the requests continued. Different framing, same pattern. "I'm a little short this month." Something came up. You know I hate to ask, but I kept sending money, though less than before. My 2-job era was over. I had quit the warehouse after paying off the mortgage because my body had simply had enough. But I was still sending a substantial amount every month, still living in the small apartment, still eating simply, still not buying myself anything that wasn't necessary. I told myself it would wind down eventually. And then my mother called to tell me about the party. Her 60th birthday was in June. She wanted to do something big. She had been talking about it for months, a real celebration. Family, friends, neighbors, people from her church. She wanted to rent the VFW hall down the street. She wanted catering. She wanted decorations. She wanted, she said, to really mark the occasion. I thought that was wonderful. My mother turning 60 was absolutely worth celebrating. She mentioned that there would be costs involved. The hall rental, the food, flowers, a DJ. I sent money for the party. I was happy to. I also, quietly, started planning my surprise. I had not been home in 8 months. The demands of work and money and simple exhaustion had kept me away. But for her 60th, I decided I was going to show up unannounced. I was going to walk through that door and watch her face when she saw me. And it was going to be one of those moments you remember forever. I booked the bus ticket, 10 hours each way, because flying was still a luxury I wasn't spending on myself. I requested time off work. I packed a small bag. I did not tell anyone I was coming. I want you to hold on to that detail. I showed up as a surprise, which means no one had time to prepare a version of events for me to see. Which means what I saw was exactly what was really happening. The bus pulled into my hometown at 11:14 in the morning. It was a Saturday in June, and the weather was perfect, clear and warm, with a breeze that smelled like cut grass and the neighbors' roses that had always bloomed wild over the fence. I had a small bag over my shoulder and a card in my jacket pocket with a heartfelt note I had written on the bus. I didn't bring a big gift. I know that matters to this story. So let me be clear about why. I had been sending money home for 5 years. I had paid off the house. I had funded this very party. The idea of also bringing some large physical gift felt redundant to me. The gift was the last half-decade of my life. The card felt right, personal, meaningful. I walked from the bus station, 40 minutes on foot. It felt good. The town looked the same. The diner on 5th was still there, the old hardware store, the elementary school with the faded mural on the side wall. And then I turned onto my mother's street, and I heard it before I saw it. Music, laughter, the sound of a crowd. The party was already going. It was barely noon, and the front yard was full of people. I stopped at the end of the driveway, and that's when I saw it. Parked in the driveway, my family's driveway, the driveway where I learned to ride a bike, was a car. Not just any car, a Tesla, gleaming red, long-range model, the kind with the panoramic roof. Brand new, no plates yet, with one of those oversized novelty bows on the hood. The kind of bow you see in car commercials. Red ribbon, enormous. The kind of bow that is meant to be photographed. I stood there for a moment, just looking at it. I thought, someone must have rented it for the party as a joke, or a neighbor parked in the wrong spot, and then I heard my mother's voice. She was standing on the porch with a small crowd around her, and she was laughing that big, warm laugh. And next to her was Marcus, grinning in a new jacket, holding a set of keys in the air. And my mother reached over and hugged him and said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "My golden boy deserves only the best." I want to tell you that I handled this with immediate grace and clarity. I want to say I understood what was happening in a calm, rational way and responded accordingly. But the truth is, I stood at the end of that driveway for almost a full minute, completely still, while the information rearranged itself in my mind. The Tesla was for Marcus. The party had a Tesla reveal. In the driveway of the house I paid for, with money I had sent. I walked up the driveway. People noticed me. Neighbors I recognized. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. There were hugs and surprised exclamations, and "Oh my God, Daniel, look at you!" And I smiled and hugged back and said the appropriate things on autopilot, while my brain was elsewhere entirely, running calculations, asking questions, trying to construct a version of events that made sense. My mother turned and saw me. For 1 second, just one, I saw something flicker across her face. Something that wasn't quite the pure joy of someone surprised by a child they hadn't expected. Something more complicated. But it was gone almost instantly. And then she was hugging me, and she smelled like her perfume, the same one she'd worn my whole life. And she said, "Baby, you came." And I said, "Happy birthday, Mom," and held on for a moment longer than I planned to. Marcus found me about 10 minutes later. He had that easy grin on his face, the one he'd had since childhood. He was wearing a jacket that probably cost more than my monthly food budget. Daniel. He gave me a bro hug, one of those one-armed, patted-on-the-back things. Didn't know you were coming. Surprise, I said. He gestured back toward the Tesla. Nice, right? Mom went all out. I looked at him. When did that get decided? Few weeks ago, he shrugged. You know, Mom, when she commits to something, she commits. I said, yeah. And then I said, what's it running these days? Something like that? He said a number, casually, like it was nothing. And the number confirmed what I already suspected. It would right around $150,000. I nodded slowly. I went to get a drink. The party was, objectively, a good party. Good food. Good music. My mother was genuinely glowing. This was her moment, her celebration, and the joy on her face was real. I found myself, despite everything churning under my surface, genuinely glad she was happy. She had worked hard her whole life. She deserved a beautiful birthday. I talked to aunts and uncles. I ate the food. I watched Marcus hold court near the Tesla, letting people sit inside it, explaining the features, laughing. I noticed the jacket he was wearing had a brand logo I recognized. Expensive. I noticed his shoes. I noticed his haircut. I thought about my bicycle. I thought about the warehouse. I thought about the 3 years of ramen noodles. I kept smiling. The moment came about 2 hours into the party. My mother called for attention. She had a few things she wanted to say, a few people she wanted to thank. Standard birthday speech stuff. I stood near the back of the crowd, holding a glass of lemonade. She thanked her friends. She thanked the neighbors. She thanked the people from her church. She talked about what 60 years of life had taught her. She got a little emotional, which made the crowd get a little emotional, which was the right kind of party moment. And then she said she wanted to thank her family. She talked about Marcus for a while, how proud she was, how much he'd grown, how much joy he brought to her life, how he had such an exciting future ahead of him. Marcus put his arm around her, and the crowd cheered. She said something briefly about being blessed to have 2 sons, and then she reached behind a table and produced a gift bag. She called my name. I came forward. The crowd watched. There were some smiles, some applause. She held out the bag. I reached inside, and I pulled out a mug. Ceramic. White. With a generic floral pattern around the rim. The kind of mug you see in a bin near the checkout counter at discount stores. The cardboard tag was still on the handle. I could read the price clearly because it was one of those tags you can see from across the room. $9.99. I held it. My mother said, I saw that and I thought of you, honey. You always loved your morning coffee. The crowd made polite sounds. A few people smiled. And Marcus, leaning against the car I had essentially bought, wearing clothes my money had helped fund, at a party in a house I owned, Marcus laughed. It wasn't a full laugh. It was a kind of snort chuckle, the kind that comes with an expression that says, "Can you believe this?" He caught the eye of someone next to him, one of his friends, and the look they exchanged was unmistakable. And then he said it. "Hey man, don't feel bad. Not everyone can be the golden boy." Someone laughed. A few people shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't done. "I'm just saying, some of us are built for success, and some of us are built for..." He gestured at me, at the mug, in a way that completed the sentence without finishing it. His friend laughed harder. I stood there. I held the mug. I looked at my mother. She was smiling, a slightly uncomfortable smile, the smile of someone who wants the moment to pass. But she did not say anything. She did not correct Marcus. She did not defend me. She laughed a small, nervous laugh and said, "Oh, Marcus, stop it," in a tone that was so gentle it was barely a reprimand at all. And that soft, unbothered laugh was the moment. Not Marcus's cruelty, not the mug itself, not even the Tesla. It was my mother's laugh, because I had heard that laugh my whole life in response to Marcus. The slightly exasperated, slightly charmed, totally forgiving laugh that meant she thought what he did was a little much, but fundamentally fine. The laugh that said, "That's just Marcus." And I understood in that moment, with total clarity, that I could hold up that mug next to the $150,000 car in the driveway, and this would still just be, "That's just Marcus." 5 years of my life. And I was standing there holding a $10 mug while my mother laughed. I smiled. I thanked her. I hugged her. I said the right things. I stayed at the party another 40 minutes, talked to a few more people, ate a piece of birthday cake. And then I told my mother I needed to check into my hotel and get some rest from the bus ride. She hugged me again, told me to come back for brunch tomorrow. I said I would try. I walked back down that driveway, past the Tesla. I did not look back. The hotel was 8 blocks away, a modest place. Old habits die hard. I got to my room and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I put the mug on the nightstand, and I looked at it for a while. I thought about the timeline. Year 1, the mortgage crisis, the calls, the fear in my mother's voice. Year 2, the warehouse shifts, waking up before dawn, my back hurting. Year 3, paying off the house, her crying, "You're my angel." Year 4, continued transfers, continued requests, continued, just a little tight. Year 5, still sending money, still in the small apartment, still on the bicycle. And then I thought about a different timeline. When had the Tesla been ordered? "A few weeks ago," Marcus said, which meant at some point in the last few weeks, my mother had taken a significant amount of money and directed it toward a car for her younger son. Where had that money come from? I thought about the medical emergency fund. In the past year, my mother had mentioned, twice, needing money for unexpected medical expenses. She was in her late 50s. It wasn't unreasonable. I had sent those amounts without question. I thought about the party costs, the hall, the catering, the decorations. I had sent money for all of it. I opened my phone and looked at my transfer history. I sat with those numbers for a long time. Then I opened my contacts and called my attorney. His name is Robert. He had helped me with the house transaction 2 years prior, and we had stayed in occasional contact. He was the kind of attorney who was also just, quietly, a trustworthy person. He picked up on the 3rd ring. It was late. I apologized. "Don't apologize," he said. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The whole story. The 5 years. The transfers. The house. The party. The mug. The Tesla. Marcus's little performance. My mother's laugh. Robert was quiet for most of it. He asked a few clarifying questions. How was the house currently structured? The trust. Was I still the controlling party? Yes. Had anything changed in that arrangement? No. Okay, he said. I need to know what my options are, I said. You have substantial options, he said. You own the property. The trust is clean. You've been the financial support structure for this household for 5 years. There are a few directions we could go depending on what you want the outcome to be. What I want, I said, is to stop. Silence. I want to stop sending money. I want to formalize the housing situation in a way that reflects the reality. And I want to make sure that whatever I've built over the last 5 years is protected. That's all completely achievable, Robert said. What does it look like in practice? He explained. The house was in a trust I controlled. My mother had been living there essentially as a beneficiary of that trust. Technically, she had no legal ownership. If I chose to, and this was all my choice, I could give formal notice that the living arrangement was changing. That could mean anything from a formal lease agreement with market rate rent to, at the more extreme end, a sale of the property. I did not want to put my mother on the street. I want to be very clear about that. That was never the goal. My mother was 60 years old, and I still loved her. In that complicated way you love people who have hurt you without meaning to, or maybe without caring to. I did not want her homeless, but I did want to stop being invisible. I did want the financial reality of this situation to be acknowledged. I did want, and here is the part that might sound cold, but is actually just true. I did want there to be consequences. Not punishment. Consequences. The kind that come naturally when you bite the hand that feeds you, and the hand, finally, stops feeding. There's something else, I said to Robert. Tell me. The Tesla. I don't know exactly how it was funded, but a significant portion of the money I've sent home over the past few years has been for what were described to me as emergencies. Medical bills, unexpected repairs. I'd like to understand if there's a case that money was misrepresented to me. Robert was quiet again. That's a different conversation, he said, and a more complicated one. But it's a conversation we can have. Can you get me the transfer records? I can have them to you tomorrow. Okay, he said. Daniel. Yeah. I'm sorry this happened to you. I looked at the mug on the nightstand. I'm not, actually, I said. I think I needed to see it clearly. I did not sleep much that night. Not out of grief or anger. Those things were there, but they were quiet. What kept me awake was something more like the mental work of reorganization, of taking 5 years of assumptions and turning them over, examining the undersides, seeing them for what they actually were. I had believed I was helping my family survive a crisis. I had been helping my family fund a lifestyle, one in which Marcus lived comfortably. My mother never had to make hard choices, and I was the invisible engine running everything from 600 miles away in a room the size of a storage unit. I had believed my sacrifice was seen, even if it wasn't spoken of much. It wasn't. Or rather, it was taken entirely for granted. It had been absorbed into the background of their lives so completely that it had become simply how things were. Daniel sends money. Marcus lives well. Mom throws parties and buys Teslas. I had believed that when the time came my family would see me. They saw a mug. I got up at 6 in the morning, made myself a cup of bad hotel coffee, and sat by the window watching the street wake up. I pulled out my phone and sent 3 messages. The first was to my bank, scheduling the cancellation of the automatic transfer that had been going out every month for 5 years. The second was to Robert, confirming that I wanted to move forward with formalizing the housing situation and attaching 5 years' worth of transfer records. The third was to a property management company in my mother's city that Robert had recommended. A company that handled exactly this kind of situation. Not evictions, not foreclosures, just the business of turning informal arrangements into formal ones. I sent those 3 messages. Then I finished my coffee. Then I went and got breakfast at the diner on 5th Street, and I ordered eggs and toast, and I ate slowly, and I tipped well, and I sat in the window booth and watched the Saturday morning go by. I want to talk about the Tesla for a moment, because the Tesla, it turned out, was not paid for outright. The Tesla was purchased using a combination of sources. Some of it was cash that had been accumulated from, yes, money I had sent. Money that had been redirected from what I was told were emergencies. Some of it was a loan, a fairly substantial loan, taken out by my mother, using the house as collateral. Using my house as collateral, without my knowledge or consent. Robert's office discovered this within 48 hours. It was not a clean or legitimate transaction from the collateral standpoint, because my mother did not, in fact, have unilateral authority to use the property as collateral. The trust structure I had set up meant she couldn't do that without my knowledge, which meant the loan was on shaky ground, which meant the Tesla, the gleaming red Tesla with the enormous bow and Marcus's name on the registration, was purchased with financing that was not legally sound. I didn't call my mother to tell her any of this. I let Robert handle the legal communications, and I went home. I took the bus back. 10 hours. Same as the way there. I put the $10 mug in my bag. I looked at it once during the trip. Sitting there in the mesh pocket of my bag. That little white ceramic mug with the flowers on it. I thought about all the mornings I had made coffee in my small apartment. The hum of the mini fridge, the brick wall outside my window, the silence of a Sunday before a warehouse shift. I thought, I did all of that for real reasons. I did it because I believed in my family. I did it because the house mattered to me. I did it because I am someone who shows up when the people he loves are in trouble. None of that was wrong. The person I became through those 5 years, the person who learned to live with almost nothing, who found dignity in frugality, who became disciplined and careful and patient. I am not ashamed of that person. What was wrong was the story I was telling myself about what it meant. The story that my sacrifice was understood, that it was reciprocal, that when the crisis had passed, the people I'd saved would turn around and see me standing there. That story was wrong, and now I knew it. I will not pretend the next few months were clean or simple. My mother called, several times. At first the tone was confused. She had received a formal letter from the property management company, and she didn't understand it. I had Robert speak with her first to explain the legal realities, because I didn't trust myself to have that conversation in a way that was fair to either of us. She called again after that. Her voice was different now, sharper. The softness was gone, replaced by something that wanted to sound like anger, but had the hollow quality of a person who knows, somewhere underneath, that they have no ground to stand on. She said I was being cruel. That family didn't do this to each other. That she was 60 years old, and she couldn't believe I was treating her this way after everything she'd done for me. I let her finish, and then I said quietly, "Mom, I paid off your house. I lived in a 400 square foot apartment for 5 years and sent you 70% of my paycheck every month. I worked night shifts at a warehouse, so you would never lose that home. And you gave Marcus a $150,000 car, and you gave me a $10 mug. Silence. I'm not taking the house from you, I said. You can live there, but you're going to pay rent at a fair rate that reflects what you can actually afford. And the money I was sending every month, that's done. It's been done since I watched Marcus laugh at me in your driveway. More silence. I love you, I said. But I'm not an ATM. And I think somewhere you forgot that I'm also just a person. She hung up. She called back 2 days later. The call was shorter. She said she needed time to process. I said that was fair. Marcus called too. Once. The call was brief. His tone was what I expected. A blend of incredulity and manufactured grievance, like a person who has never faced a real consequence trying to perform the experience of having been wronged. He said I was doing this out of jealousy, that I had always resented him, that this was about the car and my ego. I said, Marcus, I'm not going to argue with you about this. He said something else, something about how he'd always known I was the bitter one. I said, the loan on the car is in trouble because it was secured against property that couldn't legally be used as collateral. You should talk to a financial advisor. Silence. Have a good evening, I said. I hung up. About 3 weeks later, I received confirmation from Robert that the lending institution had been notified of the collateral issue and was reviewing the loan. The repossession notice came shortly after. The Tesla, the gleaming red Tesla, the car with the bow, the car in the driveway of the house I owned, the car that Marcus had leaned against while laughing at me, was repossessed on a Tuesday morning. I was not there to see it. I didn't need to be. It has been a while now. My mother and I have a relationship. It is different from what it was. More honest, somehow, even if it is also more careful. She moved toward acceptance faster than I expected. I think some part of her had always known what she was doing, and some part of her had always known it couldn't last forever. Not because I would eventually run out of money, but because eventually I would run out of something else. The willingness to be invisible. We talk on the phone every couple of weeks. It is cordial. Sometimes it is warm. There are moments where the old warmth is genuinely there. Her laugh, the stories about neighbors and church friends, the small details of her daily life that I still care about because she is still my mother. She has a job now, part-time. She pays rent to a management company that processes it into the trust I control. She has never once been late. I think the structure, the formalization of something that was always real but never acknowledged, gave her something too. A clearer relationship with the reality of her life. Without me as the invisible floor beneath everything, she had to learn to stand on the actual ground. That is not a small thing to learn at 60. I don't say that with contempt. I say it with something closer to sadness and something closer to hope. Marcus is Marcus. He has a job now, the last I heard. Something in sales. He has not apologized. I've not waited for it. We do not speak, which is not something I decided dramatically so much as something that simply became true. The distance between us turned out to be the actual distance, not a temporary gap. As for me, I moved out of the small apartment. I got a real place, not extravagant, but real. Windows with a view, A kitchen where I can actually cook. A couch I bought new, the first new piece of furniture I had purchased in 5 years. I sat in it the first night and felt something it took me a while to name. I think it was permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to spend money on myself. Permission to exist not as a function, the provider, the responsible one, the rock, but as a person. I still have the mug. It's on my kitchen shelf, white with the little flowers, the cardboard tag gone now. I use it sometimes. I make coffee and I drink it from that mug, and I think about that afternoon, the party, the Tesla, the laughter, the moment I understood. Some people have asked me why I kept it, why I'd want the reminder. I keep it because it tells the truth. It is a $10 object that represents $150,000 of sacrifice. It is the physical proof that I spent half a decade of my life building something for people who did not see me building it. It is the thing that finally made me see clearly. It is also, and I think this is the part that matters most, not the worst thing that ever happened to me. The worst thing would have been if I had never seen it. If I had gone home after that party and gotten back on the bus and returned to my small apartment and kept sending the money and kept telling myself the story about being the dependable one, the responsible one, the one who holds it all together. That would have been the tragedy, not the mug, not even the Tesla. The tragedy would have been the not knowing, the continuing to believe that invisible sacrifice is the same thing as being loved. It is not. Being loved means being seen. And I had spent 5 years making myself small and quiet and useful, and I had never once been truly seen by the people I was doing it for. The mug showed me that, which makes it, in the end, the most valuable thing in my kitchen. If you are listening to this, and you recognize yourself somewhere in this story, not necessarily in the specifics, but in the feeling, I want to say something to you directly. Loyalty is not the same as availability. Sacrifice is not the same as love. And the fact that someone needs you is not proof that they value you. The people who truly love you will not need you to empty yourself to prove it. They will not require your suffering as evidence of your commitment. They will not stand next to a $150,000 car and laugh while you hold a $10 mug. And if they do, you are allowed to close the account. You are allowed to lock the door. Not out of revenge, not out of bitterness, but out of the simple, profound, non-negotiable truth that you are also a person. You are not a function. You are not a resource. You are not the responsible one whose needs don't count. You are someone who deserves to be seen. And if the people in your life have forgotten that, maybe it's time to remind them. Loyalty ends where exploitation begins. If you bite the hand that feeds you, you shouldn't be surprised when that hand finally locks the door.